I've been an EO, I've been an entrepreneur for over 25 years, but there's one person that is taking me from 25 years to today and trained me to be the best entrepreneur that I possibly could, and actually molded me to where I'm going to be in the next little while. This guest has revolutionized the way entrepreneurs look at things, how we act. Lesley Hayes, our guest today, is going to show you, tell you things that you never knew as an entrepreneur, be the greatest person that you ever be. What is coaching? What does it take to be great? Lesley Hayes is the one that's going to teach us. Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. Thank you for coming on Shed Talk with Kevin Halliday.
And so I am a tiny part of inspiring you to be the person that you are. You have done it yourself. I've just been along to ask some questions, to provide a framework, to encourage you. It's all you.
Well, you know what, and I appreciate you saying that, because what's really interesting, as entrepreneurs, it's very lonely at the top.
Yes.
And we've got into EO, and we talk about EO and YPO, but there's always a first step in everything that we do. And if you don't know how to navigate the first little bit.
Right. That's true. The person who opens the door and sort of sets the framework and says, think about it this way and try this. And it sets the expectations and the perspective, and hopefully encourages you to be open, to be curious, to be a little bit selfish, because it's a lot of time, and to really get the most you can out of it. So, but like, if I think about it, you've probably had, say, 20 hours with me over the last 25 years. But the rest of the time, you're in your head, you're in your businesses, you're doing the work.
And you know what? And you're right. But the difference then when you're looking at this is, like, young entrepreneurs that are starting out and they talk about their coaching, they talk about wanting to get into a peer group.
Right.
If you don't have a great facilitator, if you don't have a great leader that first gets you in there to introduce you, you can't do anything. We have the tools of greatness. What you do with the tools is up to you. So how many people stay in EO? So they may be there for a year, 2 years, 3 years. And what the greatest thing about the EO thing is, and I'm a 25-year member, and you trained me my first time.
Yeah.
And then what was it? Within the last month, went back to actually get retrained 25 years later. And it was one of those things, the things you know that you don't know. And oh my God, it was incredible, because the training at the beginning was so good that all of a sudden, 25 years later, here we are. I'm actually living, breathing everything that you had taught me all the way through, and it becomes second nature.
And then hopefully what happened, it was a really cool training to have new members, to have new key executives, and to have 3 people in the room who know each other really well, but who independently decided to come to this training. It's something that I've been thinking about, is that training should actually only be a check mark for 6 or 7 years. And after that, actually, you're not forum trained anymore. It's time to go back, be part of a group, and look at it with fresh eyes. We have changed some of the language, and it matters. But more than that, get re-grounded, because we all drift, right? I mean, we've got our goal. We know where we're heading. We know what we believe. And we're a little bit lazy, and we get a little bit of a different idea, and our habits change a bit. And so we drift. We do. We all do. And so it's a matter, I'm hoping what happened was that the grounding was there, and you've come back to it more strongly, as well as really grounded yourself in, these are the pieces that matter to me. This is what's most useful today. Here's what's powerful in the room. Here's what I need to learn and listen for, and that really got stirred up again. And so, I mean, obviously you're passionate. That's not something that I had to like, come on. But it was just such a cool training day to have that kind of a mix in the room, and to try to manage the conversation so it was useful for everyone, and everybody felt peer. because that's one of the really strong groundings for an entrepreneur at various places. When you're starting out, you kind of feel a bit like you're pretending a lot and maybe slightly exaggerating to try and get a client to try with you, or to an employee that you want. So you're kind of reaching. And then you get to a place where you're doing pretty well. And then if you're lucky enough and work hard enough and the timing happens, you get success. All those people in the same room need to find where they're peer, which is where we're humans. And wherever I am, I can get better. I can be better. You can be better. And how you're going to get better is really different than how I'm going to get better. But we can inspire each other, believe in each other. And when I'm with a group of people that I see as peers that I have respect for, and you believe in me, it's so much easier for me to believe in me. Because often being in our own heads is like being behind enemy lines. And the stuff we say to ourselves and the way we hold ourselves accountable, sometimes in a really nasty way, it's not that helpful.
No. And I wanted to ask you a couple more questions and dig down a little bit deeper on this. You made the question about peers.
Yes.
What would you say an interpretation of peers are? So you're in EO.
Yeah.
You're trying to have peer to peer,
right,
and true learning back
yeah,
and forth. Because we had talked about this just before we came on.
Yeah.
About the guy, from my experience, and I look at this as enjoying an EO event or going there, is that the guy next to you might have $100 million. The guy, or you might have $1 million, but then the egos are gone. How do you navigate that peer to peer?
And so I think a lot of times when we meet people at a business event, the question in our head and our critical brain, the way Rick Rubin talks about it, our critical mind is engaged. And so we're listening for what we agree and disagree. And we're thinking about, how can this person be a client or a supplier or a friend, or like, what's our relationship going to be and how is that going to benefit me? And in EO, the deal is we don't do business with each other. We're not here so that I can figure out how you can benefit me. I'm here to learn from your stories, your experiences, your stumbles, your successes. And so I'm interested in who you are as a human rather than your success. Having a sort of everybody has to have achieved at least X, there's no top end. We don't say to people, in EO, you're so successful now, I'm sorry, you have to go to YPO. You're no longer welcome here. So the base is that I have been able to commit to something risky, right? We're all in our game 100%. Most of us have a big percentage of our assets in whatever business we're in. So we're all in. We sweat payroll. We personally make commitments to people when they come to work with us. I care about you. I'm building this for us. This is going to be a good place to work. Whereas if I'm hiring somebody in a big company, one of my daughters works at Deloitte and the other one works for the Irish health system. Both of them, the people that are saying, yes, come and work, take this position, there's no commitment on their side as to what the company will provide. We own that. We make commitments. I think of a business as a web of relationships. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're the spider, right? And you weave the web with your suppliers, with your customers, with your employees, with everyone. And so we own it. And anything that rips the web we feel it, right? The spider feels all that. So to be able to manage all that, to recognize how different our role is than the others, when we look at another entrepreneur and we have exchange at a very real and authentic level, we see each other's humanity, and it just so much of what we need for self-protection, for promotion, for whatever, we just drop it. And we all recognize that each of us is like a unique combination of talent and biases and expertise. And there are things that you are amazing at. I laughed when you said the other day about, this training to be a world level bodybuilder is easy, right? Yeah.
Yep.
That's why 7 billion people are doing it. Not, right? It's easy for you because of your mindset and your skill and your beliefs and your experiences. I have to hide chocolate.
Right.
Right? Like, it's not easy for me. When I think of all the sacrifices that you make with food every day, the commitment to the exercise, I think, whew, that's hard. For where I am, that's a big lift for me. So, but each of us can respect the other for what I'm interested in. I've put a ton of time into working on a PhD in entrepreneurial leadership, really trying to figure out why would an environment where I sit with 8 other entrepreneurial peers, or for in YPO, they're peers for other ways, they're holding that leadership role. Why does that support my personal growth? What's going on? What's growing? What about the structure is useful? So that's where I've been doing the heavy lifting. I've done heavy math. I can read when somebody tells me about research says, I'll often go pull the actual study and go read it and read, well, who answered what questions and how did they do the analysis? And so and half the time, what somebody is quoting a study as saying, that's not like when I look at the question that was asked, that question does not correlate with the interpretation. And so, right? I mean, and you're like, whoa, that sounds like a lot of work. I love that. I'm fascinated by it. I'm so intrigued in really trying to understand how could we live our best lives? Because my why is to inspire leaders to live their dreams. And the piece that I'm struggling with in that is I've been so lucky to be able to work with members of EO and YPO. And so leader in my head is somebody running a company. And everyone is a leader in their own life. But I struggle to see that, right? My bias has been formed. I love and am so intrigued by people who challenge themselves every day to get up and take that stand in front of people and say, this is what I believe, follow me.
So as you're talking about this, and I want to deep dive this a little bit because this is really interesting, because when you start talking about leaders and yourself here, and you're molding these people, okay, as in, sorry, I wouldn't say
I'm
molding.
offering the opportunity to people to step into this space and be authentic.
All right. So, okay. So you're offering them to step into the space to be authentic.
Yeah.
What is the greatest challenge you have with them stepping into that space?
And so what's fascinating is because these groups are formed and we are really carefully conflict check and we really try to keep them clean so there's no entanglements. I remember years ago when I was looking at doing a merger with another company. It was my first step to doing an IPO. And it meant that I was now going to have an office in Edmonton and Calgary. And so that's a lot. And you know that drive, really fun in February when it's dumping snow. I knew I had 2 young girls at home, and my husband is awesome at spreadsheets, great business head. I knew when I was talking to him about the pros and cons of this, a big part of him is a dad who's now going to have his wife on that highway a ton. So so he's biased. Of course, whatever decision I make, we make, material impact on him. In my forum, no impact on their lives. They truly can think of this decision and think, well, what would be the things that I would weigh if that was me looking at buying a business in Edmonton, getting involved in a business in Edmonton? What would be so you get this room where people are not entangled. And so it's a really good step to being able to be genuinely curious, not judgmental, listen for your own value, share a story that you think of when you're having empathy for me. Because probably you didn't get involved in a business in Edmonton, but you've had other times where you were making a decision that you genuinely were like, ooh, there's some really good things and there's some really hard things.
And the first thing that comes up is when you mention that, is that lean in, is that the first question is travel. Oh, I got to travel that roads. I got to do that because we had Saskatoon, we had Edmonton.
Right.
Like we did. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Then it's just like, that's a non-negotiable. I'm not even
Right.
bringing that to a forum meeting.
Or
Yeah.
I loved it. Like for me today, I love listening to long form podcasts. And so the 3-hour drive to our cabin, if I get, and now it's if I get to do it by myself, I'm like, oh. And I love EO Edmonton and YPO, of course, has work up there for me as well. I love that drive. I would never consider flying to Edmonton. I love that drive for that time for me, right? But long form podcasts weren't a thing back in the 90s when I was making this first decision. So it's just all the stories, all the things that came up for you. And then hearing a group of people that we think of as peers, we think of as people that think just like we do. And somebody says, you're like, no, non-negotiable, not doing that again. And I say, oh, I'd love those 3-hour drives. Here's what it's thinking time. It's time when I'm not on my phone. It's time, right? And someone else says, I love the exposure to the different cities. And someone else says, I'd never sacrifice putting my kids to bed. And so, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we're all the same in some ways, and we're all human, and we're all entrepreneurs, and we can list all these things that definitely put us in a cluster. And we have different perspectives and ideas. And as I listen to people, I think, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, that just hit for me. Thank you. And the other thing that's cool is I can be asking this. You're thinking about an Edmonton, Saskatoon thing, but you're open, curious, because I'm asking the question. This is my decision. And somebody else says something that just hits you as, oh, that's just such a spark. That's such a reframe. That's such a perspective. That anchors me in why I believe these things. I like the when we're curious and listening, not with our critical brain, which is listening to agree or disagree, to find fault, to, get that sort of logical, okay, I've already thought of what I want to say. Are you going to shut up now? But just our curious beginner's mindset, right? We talk about forum mindset, and we talk about, can you be curious and open and genuinely be like, I don't know an answer. What does everyone else think? What seems true for people? Right? All of that is so powerful. And so I love being able to introduce people to those ideas. It's hard. If you're an entrepreneur, you are not rewarded for sitting in your office going, wow, that's super cool. Wow, who else is another? You're rewarded for being decisive, for not looking backwards, for taking risks, for having a very useful mind that can sort things, make decisions, convince people, right? And we need both. As humans, we need both.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode.
The thing that I've been working on the last couple of years is the time when the people in the room care is when something's happened and you and I need to clear either something that was said or a decision that was made. There was so much that emerged during COVID where, let's pretend you were like, vaccines are ridiculous. I think this is all a big fraud. We should just meet in person. The meetings are so much better in person. And I've got a 90-year-old mom who's got breathing issues, and I'm like terrified to be in a room with you. I see germs everywhere. and there's 8 of us with all different levels, and we have to figure out, are we going to meet in person or not? Are some people going to meet in person? And so when it comes to, we need to have a conversation where the outcome is shared, or when there's been damage to our relationship, now it's high stakes again. Now all that benefit of being curious because it's abstract, it's real. And I think because of the upheaval of COVID, because of the joy as we got to figure out virtual training, which has been, I mean, it's pretty good. More and more people love the flexibility of that virtual training. But you and I both know that if you're on a 4-hour or 5-hour virtual training and you've got your phone here and you suddenly think, oh God, it's 10 o'clock. I wonder if my daughter made it home. And then once I've done it and I can see other people are doing it, the training's not the same. It's not. And the impact in forums, I'm really seeing.
And you can really see that because the forums blew up because of that. And as
because we didn't have a good way.
Right.
We had this rule, which is good. It comes from Imago, which is a marriage counseling, which is share the facts, talk about your story, share your feelings, and sometimes feelings first, sometimes story first, and then have a clear request. So the facts are often almost nothing, right? And our feelings come from our story, not the facts, right? I can tell you a story of it being in Europe years ago, and there was somebody on the train, a male on the train with 2 small kids, and those kids, my judgment, were out of control, running wild, misbehaving, right? Listen to all, my description is full of judgment about those children. And the dad was looking down, reading, doing whatever. And I'm like, hello, these children are disturbing 30 people. Like, don't you have judgment? And I heard him then pick up his cell phone and talk about, I'm going to cry, his wife dying. And so now I'm like, oh my God. Right? Yeah. And the facts are the same. It's the story that drives the feelings. So can we pull those apart? And can we own all the judgment that we're holding that's driving the story and driving the feelings? Can I now tell you about what I'm thinking and feeling and own it? Instead of what kind of shit are you reading on the internet that you think this is ridiculous and vaccines don't work? Oh my God, have you not heard of polio? Right? For you and I to actually have a conversation where I'm not righteously judging you, but I'm actually interested in, how do you think about this? How can we as a group navigate this and still hold what we've had, which is that you are peer, I respect you, I care about you, and what matters most to me is our relationship. And there's a really great book, I have it here, called Crucial Conversations. Oh. And when I add 2 steps to the model that EO and YPO have always used, and the first one is start with heart. The first one is start by saying, Kevin, I so respect you. I love that you're in our forum. In many ways, you are so good at what I'm bad at. And I feel like there's places where, I have some strengths that are useful for you. I really want us to have a conversation that at the end of it, our relationship is actually better. Imagine. And if you think about having a conversation with somebody you're related to, a wife or a child or an ex or whatever, people that you work with, if you've got people on your executive team that have been in place for years, they do really great work. They're not perfect, being human, neither are you. can you have a conversation with them that your intention is, and that you say it at the beginning, I want our relationship to be better at the end of this conversation. Let me share with you my perspective and truly own the facts as I filtered them for myself, right? The facts. My story about it, and not shifting to you are, this is, but here's my story. Here's what I'm telling myself, or language I love, the story I'm making up about this. Share the feelings, go back and forth with those, and then have a really reasonable request, right? And now say to you, how do you see the facts? What's the story and feelings that you've got going on? And they're so intertwined, and that I'm curiously listening, and you're curious, like we can really have a great conversation. And if you see my ask is where I say, look, we just have to do these virtually. And you're like, that sounds like it's all you. So what's your ask? How can we find something that works?
And would you say that's more of being present and to truly listen versus,
yes,
I call it non-negotiable. No, that's the way it is. I'm not even listening to, versus at any time in life, let's just be truly here together, present, and with our open book to actually have this conversation, that no judgment.
Yeah.
And that I need to truly understand what you're saying, because what I'm hearing here is not what I'm thinking here.
Yes. And it's hard, right? And so this, I think there's 3 or 4 really essential skills that we learn in Forum. And one is listening, to actually listen, to be in a room for 4 hours with 8 people. I'm listening 7/8 of the time. A lot of us, that's not the case.
And it's difficult. Like, it's really
hard
to sit there and actually listen and just say, okay, wait, bring it back.
And not drift and not.
Yeah. My phone. Thank gosh for that. There's $100 fine here, or whatever that storytelling is. And over 25 years in EO, and then looking at this, one of the greatest gifts that EO has brought is to actually truly listen.
Yes.
And to truly ask a better question of yourself, because that person right beside you is exactly going through the exact same thing. It's not lonely. You're a team.
Yes.
And
that's right.
We're all
lonely
going
is a
to
judgment.
fall. Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we think we're all that in a bag of chips. And I always say bag of chips. But the next guy beside you, he has a few more zeros, but he's just as lonely as you are, and feeling that the unks inside.
I think our society judges people that from the outside look very successful and very wealthy much harsher than those of us who, Canadians all cling to the middle class, right? But it's a journey, and it's not like you sort of can do it for an hour once and therefore I'm there. It's a constant learning, constant reinforcement. And like I said, the thing that I'm seeing in forums is it's getting harder because maybe people haven't been trained as clearly. Some people have never even heard of this ability. Like, how do we deal with a conflict that's in the room?
And I find what's interesting about Forum, or interesting about EO, or anybody that's in business groups, that, and I have a bunch of entrepreneurs that I know, and I'm going to go and have a talk with an entrepreneur.
Right.
If they're not with a business group or a mentorship, okay, whatever that is to them, the conversations are totally
different,
and you can't communicate. It's very difficult.
Communicate like. You just communicate at a very different level, where both of us have still got our sales hats on. Both of us are probably going to be very much, everything's great, I'm awesome, aren't things awesome? Or, oh my God, isn't this terrible? Canada's going to come apart. And there's a really good book that was written in the year 2000 called The Righteous Mind, and Jonathan Haidt. And he was working for the Democratic Party in the year 2000. And he wrote this book and talked about how politics were going to do this, because it stopped being a discussion of ideas and it started being values-based and right and wrong and them and us. And that's where we are today. Like it just, and we can have that happen in our family. We can have that happen in our companies. We can have that happen in our forum, where instead of being peers curiously discussing ideas and experiences and perspectives, it becomes right and wrong, good and bad. And that those are just ideas, right? And Rumi, who's from like the 11th century, said, there is a field out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. I'll meet you there.
Interesting.
So this isn't brand new,
No.
right? That the structure of forum or mastermind groups isn't brand new. Benjamin Franklin had the leather apron club. When you read about how Aristotle communicated and had groups that he could refine his ideas and be peer with, and like these are not new, but they're difficult to build and hold.
If you had to say one thing to an entrepreneur starting off and getting, what would be that one thing you tell an entrepreneur to get started? Because you have so many
God.
years, and being female,
Right.
from
Which has been an advantage. I know that sounds arrogant sometimes for me to say it. And I'm sure there have been disadvantages, but there's been lots of advantages and I lean into them. So I think no matter who you are, you can look at the things that you didn't choose, your gender, your height, your color of your eyes, whatever, and say that's a disadvantage or an advantage. And whichever you choose, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
That's because you will collect evidence. You will behave as if that is true.
So what was your greatest advantage then?
Being female.
Being female?
When in the IPO process, we took Vicom public in, I'm going to get the year wrong, in the 90s. And when I would go to Toronto and make a presentation and there'd be 15 people that those brokers had talked to that day, guess who they remembered? Because it was 14 men and me. And so if I was an adult and I had a stupid idea and I couldn't communicate with them, that's what they would remember about me. But it's just a little advantage, right? And when I think about the client that first believed in us, that is still a mentor of mine today, Michael Lang, who, he was a big part of saying, well, yeah, there aren't that many women, but whatever, own it. Yeah. Right? And I'm like, yeah, it's true.
Well, and look at today, 25 years later, you're in it and making it happen. How do you see the next year?
My next year?
Yes.
I really want to lean into understanding at an even deeper level, what are the key parts of actually having conversations where you feel that there's I don't want to say conflict, different perspectives and emotions are likely to be generated. There's old stories, old wounds, future where what we think we want in the future is different and somehow we're going to have to negotiate how to get there together. I think that is one of the most important things for entrepreneurs to get good at, to understand, and to own that there are times when the harder we push, the harder it's going to get.
So how would anybody get to know more about what you're doing and everything like that? How else would they do? Is it through EO, YPO, or?
Yeah. I mean, I have done some work with companies to a large extent because I've had the great good fortune of being a member of EO, being accepted by YPO as a CFF, a certified forum facilitator, into those communities. It's just been such a rich community to be part of. A number of them have approached me to say, could you help me with this in my business? It's not been what I do. I also do see that this ability to have clear conversations is maybe even more important on an executive team. if the leader doesn't believe what I believe, I'm setting people up. And so when the leader is a member of one of those organizations, believes what those organizations do, has forum to really ground it in themselves, it's just sort of a natural place to then be like, yes, I'm going to support you. Early on, I did work with some companies where I didn't ensure that the leader believed this. And now I've just created a really dangerous environment.
Yeah, no, it definitely would be. Well, you know what? Lesley, thank you very much for being on Shed Talk here. I hope everybody enjoys the show. Like and subscribe and push that button and make it happen. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It was great having this conversation with you. It's always great chatting with you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.